So the best pedagogical practices for online teaching. So if you're here, you're probably interested in knowing about online teaching. Now, I've been teaching online for the last 7 or 8 years, and I've learned a lot. And as you know, things have changed a lot in the last, God knows how many years, but especially in the last couple of years, more and more people are teaching online. Some people are just starting, other people have been doing it for the last few months. So I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned through my experience of online teaching. Feel free to interrupt me if you want, or if you have any questions, then you'd like to write in the chat, please do so. I'm quite happy to answer them as we go along. Okay. So for those of you who have started online teaching, you might be dealing with different issues. Some may be technological issues, or it might just be that you're not sure if you're delivering the right content, the right way, or if you're able to engage your students, especially if you have a large group of students that you're having to teach. So it might just be that you've got really good lesson content, you're using the right technology, but you don't know how to keep your students engaged. So we're going to look at all the different aspects of online teaching. So we'll look at the technology, the materials that you could be using, what to do once you're in the classroom, and also what you can do after the lesson. Okay, so everybody knows that technology is really, really important, but now more than ever, we need to be technologically literate. And what does that mean? Well, to be technologically literate just means that you need to know how to use the tools effectively. That is to access technology, to manage technology, and also to integrate technology. It might be that you're teaching online and offline, and you want to be able to use the tools to help with your lessons. Today is only online teaching that we're going to be talking about, but I just wanted to reinforce the idea that it's essential that we get as comfortable as possible with using technology. So there are 3 very basic aspects of online teaching when it comes to technology. You need to consider the platform you're going to be using. By platform, I mean it could be Zoom, for example, or it could be Microsoft Teams, or it could be Google Meetings, or any other platform where you can actually meet, use the video conferencing tools, etc. So we're going to be talking about a couple of platforms, what to do about your audio and video quality, and the network settings in this case. So when you're thinking about a platform, and here again, I'm talking from my own experience. If you're teaching online, you need to have sharing tools because you need to share a presentation like what I'm doing right now, and you need to feel comfortable using those sharing tools. So they need to be user-friendly. Also, you need to consider the writing tools, because if you don't have any writing tools, it's going to make teaching feel a little bit awkward, especially if you're not used to teaching online, because as teachers, we want to write things down. We want to show visuals. So it's really important that you have writing tools that are easy to use, and ideally that can be used by the students as well. Then breakout rooms, like the room we're in right now. That means that the students can join a different room and do group work or have discussions, and then return to the main room and share with the teacher and the other students. And also a whiteboard. A whiteboard, again, combined with the writing tools. So if you need to use visuals, if you need to explain something, and you want to make sure that the students fully understand the concept or the idea, etc., it's really useful to be able to use a whiteboard. So I chose 2 different platforms, which I think are the ones that most people have heard of. So there's Microsoft Teams. Okay, so Microsoft Teams is usually the platform of choice for companies, businesses, and for good reasons. I mean, the pros are that it's free. Okay, so you just need a Microsoft account. It's easily available, so most people have access to Microsoft Teams, and it's user-friendly. You just log in and that's it. The cons are that it's very hard to share screens. Now, you can share the screen, but when you share the screen, you can't see the student as easily as you can on Zoom, for example. And the writing tools are not very user-friendly. In fact, I've really struggled with writing on Microsoft Teams. Zoom, which is the one we're using today, and it's my platform of choice. It has been my platform of choice for many years, even before the pandemic. I mean, it was quite funny for me because I knew Zoom and I would tell people, well, let's have a Zoom meeting. But before 2020, most people hadn't heard of Zoom. So it's like, what's that? But now everybody, knows Zoom. It's a platform that many people are used to using. So for me personally, the pros are that it's easy to share screens. It's easy to use writing tools for both sides. You can give the student permission to write. There is the whiteboard tool as well. And in fact, Zoom, they've updated their services recently, and you have the option of using a shared whiteboard, which is really useful when it comes to assignments and homework, etc. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later. And of course, the breakout rooms, which are great for group discussions and, assignments, exercises, etc. The cons are that unfortunately you have to pay a small fee. Now, Zoom used to be free for people, like if you had a one-to-one meeting, but now there's a maximum time limit of 40 minutes. And if your sessions are longer than 40 minutes, then you have to pay a monthly fee. Moving on to audio and video. Now, as you can see, I'm wearing headphones. Okay, and I know they might not be very flattering, but in my experience, they're essential. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this later as well. So the focus in terms of audio and video is on engaging with your students. That's your priority here. You want your students to feel as if you're with them in their room or in the classroom, okay? So the visual should be appealing in the sense that your teaching space should match your teaching style. So for example, if you're teaching children, you should have some nice pictures on the walls, some numbers, letters, etc. If you're teaching adults, like I tend to do, maybe your background should be a little bit more professional. On the other hand, if you have an informal setting, like maybe a painting or a picture or something that makes the students feel that they can relate to you, again, they will feel more connected to you as well. With the voice, I think that in order to engage your students, and we had, the previous talk was about motivation and the way that you kind of encourage people to engage. And I think that if you bring that sense of enthusiasm into your own voice when you're presenting, then the students will engage with you, as well as other things like audio and visual examples. So anything that keeps them focused on what you're saying and what you're doing in the session. Now, going into a little bit more detail when it comes to the teaching space. Okay, so we have different things to take into account: the lighting, the backgrounds, whether you want to sit or stand, the audio quality, and also, of course, your network, which is essential. So when it comes to lighting, it's really important that your face is well lit, because this way the students will feel like they are present with you. And there are a couple of tips to take into account. Okay, for example, you should light yourself from the front. So maybe use a desk lamp, which is moved behind or above your computer. In my case, for example, my desk lamp is just above my computer. I should avoid backlight because it will create shadows. And I know that having natural light is always a good thing, but avoid having a window behind you because your face will become obscured and the students won't be able to see you well. I don't know if anyone has any questions so far. If not, I'll move on. Okay. So background and locations. Okay. Now, we might want to make our background look interesting by having, I don't know, books, different pictures, etc. But you need to be careful that it's not too distracting for the students, because they might spend time trying to examine what your background is and what things you have there, rather than focusing on what you're actually teaching them at the time. And of course, you have to protect your own privacy. So you should avoid having photos or objects that compromise your security online. Okay, I think it's common sense, but sometimes, it's things that you might forget. In terms of sitting or standing, I think it's all about the position of the camera. It's entirely up to you. If you feel that you're more enthusiastic when you're standing, more dynamic, go ahead, do it. But make sure that you always place yourself in the center of the frame, okay? And that you position your camera at or slightly above the eye level. So when you're looking at the screen, you'll be making eye contact with the student, if you like. So you're always looking at that camera, that little light, and you focus your sight on that to make sure that the student feels that you're making eye contact with them. Again, you're engaging them. And it's a great way to make a connection with your students. So in terms of the audio quality, it goes without saying, but obviously you need to make sure that you're heard. So you need to ensure that you're connected to the sound properly, that the volume is right. Consider using a USB mic. Okay, so for example, the one I'm using captures my voice, but not the background noise. And that's one of the reasons that is a good idea to have a mic. Also with the headphones, you can hear your students' voices clearly. And especially if you're teaching ESL, as I do, it's quite important for the pronunciation. You need to be able to listen to the way they pronounce the words. So by wearing headphones, you're isolating any other background noise away from yourself, and you can hear their voices clearly. And if you're teaching from home, try to make sure that you're in a quiet space, so you're not going to be interrupted by your family or by your pets, in that you basically have a nice setup without any interruptions. The home network, so the connection. Now, these are just the requirements that most people or even Zoom recommends, because we're using Zoom and because I use Zoom for my lessons. I'm not in any way technologically savvy, so I don't know what a bandwidth is or what it should be, but what you can do is go to speed test, check your upload and download speeds against the recommendations by Zoom. So you need to make sure that, for example, in this case, it's 20 and it's running properly. And all this should be done before your session, so you can make sure that you're not going to have any problems in the actual lecture. And of course, it's important that you keep your software up to date and your computer's battery is charged. It goes without saying, but it could just be that you forgot to charge your computer and then you're halfway through a session and oops, I need to go get my charger, which is not very good. Again, all these are things, little things but when you're teaching online, if you don't make sure that you tick all these boxes, you won't be able to engage your students successfully in the session. Okay, so materials. Now, when you teach online, well, when you teach full stop, materials are your number one priority. Okay, especially if you're teaching online, you have to be a little bit more creative when it comes to materials. It has to be something that will look visually appealing. It has to be something that is easy to use, and it has to be engaging, again, for the students. So I'll look at preparing some materials in advance and how you can do it, and also where to find some already made materials, okay, which is always useful. Okay, so preparing in advance, right? So the first thing to consider is scripting. what do I mean by scripting? Well, it's not just about writing a script, but it's about helping you focus on what you want to achieve in the lesson. So imagine that you have all your materials, they look beautiful, okay? You're ready for the lesson, you log on, your students join in.
Sorry to interrupt you, Miss Ruth. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And you just kind of lose track because you didn't prepare the script. So you just make sure that you've got the script, you keep it nice and short, you select the images, and you add the cues, emphasis you want to add. Some more tips to increase the engagement. So you make sure that you're using all the teaching tools, okay, and always come back to your learning objectives. Okay, resources, right? Where to find them? Depending on your subject, you can find resources online for sure. Academia, I found, is a good place to find resources on different topics. For EFL and ESL, I recommend myself Lingua House for adults, ready-made lesson plans, Twinkle for young learners, and then some ESL video, ESL podcast, and Script is a great place to find PDF versions of classroom materials. So I was going to talk about pre-recording lessons, but I think maybe we'll just move on to live lessons, which are more relevant to the people here today, I think. So it's important that you have an agenda, that you practice, and that you make your transitions explicit. You know, it flows naturally. The students know what is going to come next, what to expect. Read the room. Even online, you have to make sure that the students, take their turn and they all get an opportunity to talk. So for example, make sure you use breakout rooms for the exercises, invite and respond questions using the chat, encourage them to reflect. For example, say, I'd like you to think about, use the whiteboard so they can write on the whiteboards as well, use the raise hand facility tool on Zoom, and even cold call the students. You can ask one of them a question in the session, and that ensures that they're all participating. So after the lesson, you use the Zoom shared whiteboard if you want to assign homework, or you can ask the students to upload their assignments on Google Docs, or if it's a discussion, you've got the Canvas discussion forum option as well. Oops, sorry. Okay, so over to you. What do you think, and what resources or ideas would you add or recommend? Okay, I would love to hear it. And thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you, Ruth. Does anybody have any questions? Please ask in the chat room, or you can just speak here.
You're welcome, Anna. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Yes, I do. I do prefer Zoom over Teams, definitely, because with Teams, I've tried using Teams, and when you share the screens, you can't see the students anymore, and the writing tools are really difficult to use. Yes, I can certainly share the resources. Again, because I was running out of time, I kind of skipped through a little bit, so I'm more than happy to share the presentation. I will speak to Webinar Jam to make sure they have access to it. You're welcome. That's a good question. I think it's Hamoudi. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I think Zoom is just about maybe, I don't know, zooming in to the conversation perhaps, but I'm not quite sure what the meaning is myself. Welcome. Just one thing I would like to say, because I kind of skipped that bit. Pre-recording parts of your session is also useful. So say, for example, that you're teaching grammar and you want to explain to the students before the session. So you can record yourself doing a little presentation on a grammar point and send it to the students, for example, for homework to study.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much for your presentation.